This is Craig and Andrew, two Ranger qualified Army officers with MBAs, here to help you improve your business through leadership.
Each week, we'll deliver easy lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom on how to improve team performance. If you're a leader or want to be, this is the place for you.
Welcome to the cohort.
Disclaimer: the views in this podcast are those of the authors alone and do not represent the views of the Department of Defense or the U.S. Army.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we're going to talk about planning.
Boo! Boo!
Yeah, that's usually the reaction it gets a lot of times. People are like, no, we don't need to plan this. Let's just go do it.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to talk about, the idea of being proactive and the value of it and what it's going to allow you to do as a leader to enable your team to be high performers.
Yeah, as boring as a topic as it may be, it definitely helps you be a better leader, helps your employees be better employees, and reduces conflict. It makes your unit and your organization much more efficient. Yeah. So it may be boring, but absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, it's a part of or has the potential to be a part of any activity or any action that an organization does. I think that too often we reserve planning for the big, large events, and we say, oh, well, we don't need to do that. This is just a small thing. This is just a one-day event. We don't need to plan that. And I think back to what we did in the Army, and we planned our, PT sessions every morning for a workout.
Yeah.
And I would have some people say, oh, like I'll decide in the morning what I'm going to do. It's like, no, you're going to have a comprehensive plan for the next 6 weeks. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Are we trying to run faster? Are we trying to do more push-ups? Are we trying to carry heavy things?
Yeah.
What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Because if we don't know what goals we're trying to accomplish, we're going to have a hard time getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to know where you're going to get
Right.
there.
And I think, and as a thought from outside the military, there's actually a Muhammad Ali quote where he said to the effect, I never want to fight in the ring. I always want it in preparation. And I find that interesting because most people look at the actions and that is where, you achieve victory. But the reality is planning can be where the real success is. And if you take that time and dedicate it up front, as boring or not fun as it is, I think that the entire organization benefits, not just the leader, not just the team, but the entire organization because of how valuable it is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, man.
And when we're talking planning, I mean, really, I think we could break it down into near term, short term, and long range planning. Those, and I think that's a challenge sometimes because we may do one or the other. We may say, oh, this is our plan for the year, and we've got maybe a handful of goals. Or the opposite end is every Monday we may come up with a plan for that week. But if we don't do both, we don't do all of it, we're really not maximizing the effect of the planning because, in my opinion, it should be nested so that whatever our annual goals are, our monthly goals should support that. Our weekly goals should support our monthly goals all the way down to, hey, what do I need to get done this morning before lunch? In theory, it should all be nested together.
Yeah, and to go back to your idea that the plan doesn't have to be for these huge things, right? It can be small, right? Well, think about on the production line, if you've got a big critical machine, right? Well, you know that a year from now, you're going to have to replace it or shut it down entirely for like a week or something, right? So you can plan that out, right? And make the people in finance aware, the people that are running the line aware, make the people, your boss aware that, hey, and a year from today or on this date, we're
Hmm.
going to have to shut down the line entirely to replace this machine. But that's kind of one plan in itself, right? How are you going to mitigate that, right? How are you going to communicate that to everyone, and how's the organization going to overcome that? And then there's other little pieces of the plan, right? And that can be planned out almost daily, weekly, monthly, right? Because you have to maintain that piece until a year from now.
Right.
So what do you have to do between now and then to keep it running, or to get the mitigation strategy for when you do have to shut it down a year from now in place, right? So if you have six key pieces of maintenance you got to do before you shut it down for good. Well, when are you going to do those? So that's like can kind of be another little plan part.
Yeah.
And then what do those little things look like? So this month on this date, I got to shut down for a couple hours to grease it. Well,
Hmm.
do you have the grease? You got to tell everybody who's actually going to do it. Are you going to be there? Do you have the time? Right. So again, that is the plan that can that is scalable. Right. That's a
Hmm.
small part. That's a near term part of a longer plan that is really much bigger.
Yeah, and that I think in that scenario, it reminds me of utilizing backwards planning,
Yeah.
and some people call it different things, but we always called it backwards planning. To if in that scenario we know 1 year out we're going to replace this piece of equipment, but that may mean that we need to order the new piece of equipment 10 months out. And then
Mm.
that may mean that we need to make sure that we have a source of funding 9 months out. And there's all of these things that we have to do, but we have to start at the end goal. What is our objective here? And in that example, it's replacing a piece of equipment on the production line. And we have to walk it back so that we make sure that we account for everything. And what I what I don't want to happen is, my failure to backwards plan is
Mm.
I go, oh yeah, we're going to swap that out in about a year. And I wait until, let's say it's only 3 months from now, and I go to order this equipment and I realize it's going to take them 5 months to get me the piece of equipment I need.
Yeah.
That is going to have a severe impact. And so we have to do our long range planning far enough out in advance to prevent those type of hiccups. Now we're always going to have things like COVID, which really affected supply chain logistics that we can't foresee. But we want to make sure that on our regular business model and our plan, we should have a good enough idea of how long it takes to get certain equipment or supplies, and plan for that far enough in advance. And by doing the backwards planning, we're really going to be able to maximize our time, uh, as we know how much time is available for those things. But if we just try to plan from forward, we
Mm.
may actually miss that deadline. We may
Yeah.
actually, um, it may not happen next year. It may happen 2 years from now. But by utilizing that technique of starting at your end state and then planning all the things that must be achieved, whether it's maintenance. So if we know that we're trying to get one more year of operational effectiveness out of this piece of equipment, and it's going to have to be maintenance 4 times, well, we're going to backwards plan all that stuff and
Yeah.
step that back. And then that allows us as leaders to communicate that plan to our teams, and that enables us to empower them to then just go execute that plan, because we can be confident that it will be it's got a high level success rate, I guess would be the way to articulate that.
Yeah. It's not not even just about maintenance on a piece of equipment, right? Like think about if you're, a shift supervisor at Target or something,
Hmm.
right? Like the stuff for Easter doesn't just show up one day,
Right.
right? And if it does, well, you're going to need more people than you normally have on a shift. right?
Hmm.
And this stuff from Valentine's Day has got to be off the shelf,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So, you know, after Valentine's Day, you can go ahead and plan all of that out, right? Start, hey, on February 15th, we're moving all this stuff to the sale rack. And
Hmm.
I need two extra people, to help do that. So you schedule two extra people, and then on the 16th of February, all the Easter stuff showing up. So you get more people, and that may mean you might have to hire more people.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that allows you, yeah, to hit the target, right? Instead of showing up on February 15th, and there's two truckloads of Easter bunnies sitting out in your in your parking lot, and you still got Valentine's Day stuff out there.
Yeah, I think when people ask me, okay, so why should I bother planning? Because everybody agrees that plans change, and
Sure.
there's always going to be stuff that shows up, and I like to think about it as it allows me to set the conditions to the best of my ability for my team. I want my
Mm,
team to be successful. And what planning does is it allows me to think through all the potential friction points. I
yeah.
think through all of um, the resource constraints, everything that we are trying to achieve, and what may prevent us from getting there. And then what can we do to mitigate that? And if I can mitigate the risk and set the conditions for my team to tip the scales in their favor, then I feel like that energy is worth it. And that's where the
Yeah.
value of planning really stands out. And
Yeah.
when, with your example of, did you order your seasonal products or not? You want those to come in at the right time. And then if you have thought through the logistics, who's going to be there that day, you what happens when your forklift driver calls out sick? Do we have somebody else trained on that equipment?
Hmm.
If not, does that delay us by one day? Or does that say, well, actually, we can call this other individual in today, maybe have to pay him overtime, but we can stay on schedule?
Yeah. Or
And these
maybe
are
another store has one nearby,
right.
right?
Yeah, there's so many options, and it but if we don't think through all this stuff ahead of time and we're just trying to be reactionary, it's more expensive. We have more problems. We fail
Mm,
more. The the value of planning and that being proactive is so high that I don't understand why so many leaders have a resistance to the planning.
mm.
Other than I don't think it was ever something they were trained how to do, as opposed to
Yeah,
um,
it could be.
and in our background with planning was one of the first tools that we learned. That was very early on. I mean, we were still even before commissioning as officers, how to plan some type of operation, whether it be a early morning workout or an actual patrol in a simulated environment. Whatever the case was, we had to develop those plans and then execute them. And then afterwards, they were always critiqued. And it
Mm.
was, hey, this is what went well, this is what didn't. And so next time you plan a similar event or operation, you now know a little bit more than you did last time. And so it should continually improve and get better.
Yeah. To be clear, you don't have to get it right the first time. Just better than last time, right?
Yeah. And a little planning is better than no
I
planning.
better no play. You did touch on something I wanted to expand a little bit. Is so if you don't plan, right? So all your stuff shows up on February 16th. All your stuff shows up February 16th. You still got Valentine's stuff on the shelf. And now you're on shift as the supervisor, right? Well, you got a big problem on your hands now, right? Because now not only are the customers going to be frustrated because they can't buy Easter stuff yet. There's just all this old Valentine stuff they don't want to buy anymore. And now you have to make the employees that you do have on hand work more and probably overtime to help clear out all the other stuff. That means other stuff might not get done. at
Right.
the store, and then you have to perhaps call in people on their day off. They have to come in, so that's going to be incredibly frustrating to those employees. And there's few things that are more frustrating to people that are not in charge than to not know what's going on and to be kind of jerked around. Right? Do this. No, 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 no. Do that. No,
Yeah.
sorry. Go back and do that again. So, sorry. Go
Mhm.
over here and come and do this because you're busy reacting to the problems that weren't solved earlier when it could have been planned out.
Yeah, because we talk about conflict resolution and how do we solve
Mm,
problems, and whether it be interpersonal or between departments and things. One way you can mitigate that is by effective planning. The more things that you plan out ahead of time and you set those conditions and you mitigate those risks, you're going to find that you have less conflict because everybody's aware of what's going on. Everyone understands what the priorities are and who's responsible for what. And so rather than trying to keep, two employees from arguing or keeping these two departments from being hyper competitive, you may realize that by, good, thorough plans, you've avoided a lot of that.
mm,
And I'm not telling you you'll never have, you know, conflicts to resolve, but if you reduce the number of occurrences, that in itself is another benefit of planning.
yeah. It, so I want to talk about what we used to call shift from a known point.
Hmm.
Right. So, really, this is an artillery term. Like you plan out a target for artillery well before the operation. You coordinate it with the cannons, and you give it a target name, right? Alpha Bravo 1001 or whatever, right? Well, so maybe it turns out the enemy isn't there, but they're 500 meters away from it at a place you didn't plan a target. Well, then you can shift from that point, right?
Exactly.
Instead of having to go through the entire process while you're in contact while the enemy's still moving, you can just say shift from Alpha Bravo 1001 500 meters east or whatever it is, right? And that makes it significantly easier to go ahead and put fires faster on the enemy. Now, hopefully you're not going to be caught in artillery on your box store, but so say the truck of Easter stuff doesn't arrive on the 16th like it's supposed to, right? Well, you're sitting there holding the bag on the 16th, but that's still easier than it would have been the opposite. What you could do is shift from an on point, right? You can say, hey, okay, listen, I told you guys you had to come into work today, but um, can you come in tomorrow? We can go ahead and clear all this Valentine's Day stuff off. So make room. So you can still do like half the plan
Yeah.
and be in a better place to plan for when the stuff does arrive. And it's not going to be as frustrating as surprise, you have to come in today.
Yeah. And I think that goes to the idea of leaders want or should be agile. You
Mm,
should be able to adapt to the situation. And I think that, the more we communicate, especially during the planning of something significant, then that allows us to, as you said, shift from that known point. If this is how we normally operate, or this is what our plan is, we may have during the planning process discovered some friction points that are highly likely. Maybe we know that our seasonal deliveries are known to be late. Maybe
mm,
this has happened to
mm,
us in the past. And so what we can do is say, okay, our plan is to be here on this date, ready to go for this truck. If the truck does not show up, this is what we will do. You can hash all that stuff out, a month in advance, as opposed to be standing there on the back docks at 2 in the morning in the freezing rain trying to figure out what
yeah,
you're going to do. That's not the
yeah,
time to be coming up with a new plan. Is it is it possible to come up with a plan on the fly? Absolutely. Me and you both
sure.
know that there's going to be
Uh,
times when you have to, at 2 in the morning in the freezing rain, come up with a better idea, or at least a different one. But if you were able to think about it a month ahead of time and you knew the potential problems, As a leader, you can go ahead and be proactive and plan out some contingencies. Hey, if this doesn't work, we're going to go to this. If that's not feasible, we have an alternate plan there too. And so I think that is something to keep in mind for leaders is you don't have to scrap the entire plan. You
Hmm.
may just have to make some adjustments to it and stay agile and be able to adapt to the situation.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time, right? It doesn't have to be
No,
perfect at all. Just better than last time, right?
exactly.
Don't be afraid to get started because you have to start at some point, and the end result is going to be better than if you didn't start at all, by
Yeah, and
far.
I think back to Iraq, and my platoon was on. We were a quick reaction force, which was something we
Mm.
rotated through a task, and depending on what the other platoons were doing as a quick reaction force, you may just be um, in the area of your trucks, ready to go within, say, 10 minutes, or you may actually be sitting in the truck with it running, ready to leave the outpost within, we'll say, 1 minute. And when you're a quick reaction force, you're kind of just in case. So everybody hopes that you don't have to use the QRF because that generally means something outside in the on the battlefield did not go according to plan.
Yeah, it's not usually a good thing.
But when that happens, so how do you plan as QRF where you don't even know what type of scenario you're going into? So
Mm.
some people may say, "Oh, well, you're wasting time if you're planning. You don't know if you're going to help recover a vehicle that was damaged. You don't know if you're going into a firefight, or maybe just to go secure an LZ for a medevac. There's no way to know." Well, I would offer a different thought. I say that allows you to talk through all those scenarios and plan
Mm.
for all of them, as many as you can think of.
Yeah,
Because when you're on QRF, a lot of times you're kind of restrained to that area. But I know me and my squad leaders would come together and we would have these plans. And maybe it was only 80% of the plan. But hey,
yeah,
if we're there for
yeah,
this is how we're going to react. This is the order that the vehicles will leave the outpost depending on the scenario. And some of the small things that you can go ahead and get out of the way. Now, does that mean
yeah,
you can't change your plan? No. But to your point of a little planning is better than no planning. That was
yeah,
always a better option than us just sitting around talking about the weather,
yeah,
waiting
right.
to see what was going to be the call.
Yeah, right. I mean, think about all the different things. You may not know exactly what the mission's going on, but you know you're going on a mission, right? So you need gas in the trucks, you need bullets in your guns, you need food in your soldiers' bellies. Like
Yeah.
those kind of things you can go ahead and kind of plan out and make sure you're ready to go when that time comes.
Yeah. I think that there's so much value in you just sitting there thinking through what are the most likely things.
Mhm.
Because if you've operated in your industry for any given time, you know what the most likely friction points are. You know what's going to be the most valuable thing that you can plan for. And if even if you do that to a small degree, maybe you do only maybe you're not planning right now and you're like, yeah, we're very reactive. Pick one or two large things, big events, and plan for those. Even if you just plan a little bit for some of your big events, see if that changes how it concluded. What was your success rate like? Did it improve the situation? I think you're going to find that there was significant improvement even with a little bit of planning. And then you start to um, migrate that out throughout your entire company or your entire team into the smaller activities.
Yeah,
Maybe you start with a monthly planning session, and then you move to where you kind of have a weekly huddle to make sure that that week is aligned inside of that month and its goals. You don't have to go from no planning to all the planning in one step.
yeah,
That's not how any of us learned it. We started with doing things incrementally. but there's so much value in it. I think that unfortunately a lot of times leaders neglect that.
Yeah, and if you're a junior leader and you're new to the role and you don't know what to plan for, you can ask, right? Hey, boss, are there anything in particular that we need to be ready for?
Hmm.
Or what do you think is
Yeah.
something we need to plan for that might happen? Right. And that will give you some ideas as to what you could start doing and kind of get ahead of. Right. Because, like if you're working in a kitchen, right, you're going to sharpen the knives every so often.
Yeah.
Well, hey, chef, how often do you need me to sharpen your knives? Every 2 days. Okay, well, so then now you know to plan out you and your sous chefs, right? Like how to plan
Yeah.
out. Hey, eh, on Monday, Craig, you've got it. On Wednesdays,
Hmm.
I've got it.
Yeah.
That way they know, and that's their job, and you've got it done. So start there, right? You can ask.
And I think, it's interesting you bring up, taking that initiative to look for other things to plan for. And I think that's a good point of when you're trying to, maybe as a junior leader, you want to take some initiative but you're in that spot where you're like, well, I don't know exactly what else I have maybe the authority to do. No one's going to be upset with you drafting some plans. No one's going
Yeah,
to be upset
yeah,
with you saying, hey, I'm trying to think ahead. I know that last year we had an issue where we had, two trucks show up instead of just one on this day, and we didn't have the ability to, download both of them. I talked with our scheduler, and we've come up with a plan to hopefully prevent this in the future. It's a
mhm.
good way to show some initiative with your team and your organization, to mitigate risk. And nobody likes more risk. We're all looking for less of it in the business world.
And it's not, you don't just have to ask your boss, right? You can ask the people that work for you. Hey, what's the biggest problem here? What do you see as the
Yeah.
problem? Or
Yeah.
what is frustrating to you about how we do things, or something like that, right? And that could give you an idea also of some things that perhaps you could fix or bring up to the people that can fix it, and present them a recommendation for the problem as well.
Yeah. I think that speaks to the communication, wanting to have that open dialogue with your
Mm,
team of where are the friction points. Because, overall, we're trying to build trust with our teams. That's
yeah.
what everything's about. And having that dialogue and that open communication channel to where we can sit down with them and say, okay, hey, what are the problems you've seen in the past, the friction points, so that we can try to get ahead of it? What should we be planning for? And you've probably got some smart people inside your organizations that don't bring these problems to you. They don't bring these potential solutions to you because maybe you're new to that role. They don't know how you're going to respond. But as you build that trust, they're going to help key in on things that you should focus your planning on. And like I said, you can't plan for everything all at once. It's going to have to be incremental. But I think you should be deliberate in what you choose to plan for because there's only so many hours in a day, unfortunately.
Mhm.
I asked for 36-hour days for Christmas one year and I was disappointed. Santa did not show up with that.
No,
But
didn't do that for you.
no. Um, but I think that if we, prioritize that, and that is something we can make a huge impact, especially when you look at it cumulatively. You start planning for events, look back after you've done it for 1 quarter or one
Mhm.
year, you're going to notice, I think, a lot of benefit and impact that you've made to the organization.
Yeah.
One other framework I think is important to address is the idea of the one thirds, two thirds rule.
Yep, that's an important one.
So, something as Army officers, we learn really early in our careers, and something that we try to stick to throughout. And at times it's challenging to abide by, but I think that it is something that was instrumental in uh, not just building trust in my team, but building the skills of leadership inside of my team as well. Because the idea of this is you're giving your team more time for execution.
Yeah.
And time is a very valuable resource. And when you consistently give that to your team, they understand the importance. And I think that helps develop them, whether they're an individual contributor or a leader. I think it helps develop them as well. And so, to the idea of one thirds, two thirds is if you're giving a task, someone gives you a task, whether that be, your department lead, your boss, you take that entire amount of time from when you first find out about it to the point of the date of execution, and you only utilize one third of that time for your planning. And then you hand that off to your team so they have two-thirds of the amount of time in order to execute that task.
Yeah.
And so if there is a report that is due and it's due in 9 days, you only utilize 3 days of that time to maybe define the scope, provide key details, and assign, who you want to be responsible for this report. There may be different parts to it. And then that allows them 6 days to actually submit the drafts, to gather and refine that content and finalize it. But what you don't want to do is sit around and think about it for 8 days and think about how you would like for this report. And then you turn around and give it to your team and they've got 24 hours to turn it around.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you really want that. Giving them two-thirds of the time is critical. And sometimes it's days, sometimes it's hours. Maybe the task is due in 3 days. And so you've got 24 hours to figure out what you want to do about it, come up with your plan, and then communicate that to your team so that they have those 2 days to be able to do it. Um, and it's funny because it's always perception on time, but I mean, I remember getting missions or patrols that we needed to go execute, and it may be less than 3 hours from the time I find out to the time we're supposed to be leaving. And
Mm.
so you'll actually find that you can do this a little bit of it simultaneous. We had the idea of a warning order before an operations order in the Army, to where if I find out about this report on day one, that doesn't mean I got to keep it secret from you.
Yeah.
I may hold a 10-minute meeting that just says, hey, team, check it out. We've got this report that's due in 9 days. I'm going to go through some of the data and sort out some categories. It'll probably take me 2 or 3 days. And then you'll have 6 days to actually gather the details and finalize this thing and put it in whatever
Mm.
format. That way they at least know it's coming. There's no
Yeah.
surprises. A lot of people don't like surprises at work.
Yeah. And then that also allows them to perform better when it is time, right? Because then if they know that's coming here in a few days, they can go and check their stock to make sure they've what they're if they need to order any more parts for something, or how many their part expenditure,
Yeah.
right, to provide in the report, right? You can give them a few, kind of guidance. Hey, this report. It's going to be about this. That might give them enough to start doing a little bit of stuff before you actually hand off the drafts to them, or all of the details, right?
Right. Yeah. And so I think it's important because I see it so many times in business where someone knows, maybe it's a department head, maybe it's a mid level leader. They know that there's a task that must be done by a certain date, and they sit on that information and they hold it. And then all of a sudden it's an emergency for the team. And they're like, hey guys, we got to get this done today, or we got to get it done by the end of the week. And then you find out they knew about it 6 months ago. And it's like, what? Why would you keep that from me? Like, why would we
Mm.
not do this a little bit over time? We could have all sat down and come up with a good plan and have a much better product or service at the end of it, as opposed to it just being us. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I
again, it
must be
goes back to
hungry or
being
something.
proactive instead of reactionary. And the
Yeah.
more time we waste, we're just going to be reactionary.
I, I must be hungry or something because I'm going back to my chef example. So I think about cooking Thanksgiving dinner, right?
Yeah.
The turkey is the longest bit, right? So are
Yep.
you're gonna wait until the turkey is cooked to tell all your other sous chefs what bits they're gonna cook? Hey, we need
Yeah.
you to make mashed potatoes. You to make uh, the dressing.
Yeah. Like who's
You've got
cooking mac and
15 minutes.
cheese?
Go. Turkey's done. So you've got until I'm done carving it to get your sides ready.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to work, is it?
No. And I mean, and really, Thanksgiving dinner is probably a good example of planning because there's so many pieces that go in there. Like you got to plan not just for the time of that turkey. Was it previously frozen and you had to thaw it out
Oh,
first?
oh,
Because that may be like days in advance.
yeah.
And then how do you get the mashed potatoes and the macaroni and cheese to be
Forgot
ready
mac and
and
cheese.
hot
Gee,
at
I forgot mac and cheese.
the time for eating? And then what about all the other people? All the people have to
Yeah.
be there. There's logistics and transportation. I feel like we could probably do a framework based off Thanksgiving dinner and planning. So,
And it would be delicious.
yeah.
All right, Craig. I think that's it, man. I
Yeah,
think we've bored everybody enough.
I think that I think now everybody's probably hungry and thinking about
Yeah.
Thanksgiving dinner in March. So you got time to wait for that, but that is an interesting idea.
Hopefully,
Well,
this was helpful. I think we illustrated the value in it at least.
yeah, and I think that the important thing is to take the time. It's like an investment. You're going to get your return on investment back in the actual execution if you take the time to plan. And so if you're
Mhm.
not planning now or only planning for large events, I recommend that um, expand that out. Start scaling that to smaller projects. And I think the more that you do it, you'll find the value there.
Yep.
All right. Appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks, guys. As always, take these lessons, use them, and spread them. Everyone is welcome in the cohort.
Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and drop us a line at commandpostcohort.com to request a specific topic.
We'll see you next time on the cohort.